For the online course, I want to go back because I missed 2 slides. I talked about it, but I want to just capture them so that the online course can see that there's the Jones versus Mayer. There's never an exception to race. There's an exception to all of the classes except race. Never a race exception. Once again, back to the 1866. All right, that's the main one. So you can never, ever discriminate on race. Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which was the Jones versus Mayer, brings in the fair housing. That's what morphs into the fair housing. Sexual discrimination in the Housing and Community Development Act of 74. It is a gender, not orientation. Then 88, we talked about, brings in the last 2. Family, discrimination, and handicap. So there's 7 protected classes, all right? Now, there is an exemption in here. It's called HOPA, Housings for Older People. Age is not a protected class, right? We discriminate on age all the time. 16 to drive, 18 to vote, 21 to drink, 55 to get the good menu at Denny's. There are housings additions that deal with over 55 housing. They have to qualify, and there are certain things they have to do to get that qualification. 80% have to have one person over the age of 55. So it is not discriminatory in nature to have housing additions strictly for older people, okay? Because they have qualified for that HOPA exemption. All right, that is not a discriminatory practice. Now, the fair housing, one of the things they talk about, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I get so amped up in this chapter because it's so important, and there's really a lot in here. One of the things you got to understand is this is a effects law, not an intent law. All right? Meaning, what was the effect, not what was the intent. Okay? In most all criminal cases, they have to prove intent. You had an intention to murder that person to get murder charge, manslaughter otherwise, all right? This law is an effects. What was the effect? Let me give you a good example of how you can easily get into trouble without really even thinking about it. You guys all remember Usain Bolt, right? From Jamaica that ran the Olympics and was fast. And I just went down to Jamaica a month or so ago. It is hot. And I figured he had to run fast because you can't run in that like long distance. 100 yards and I'm done. All right? But I was talking to a buddy of mine one day, and we were sitting there having a cigar, and we were talking about Hussein, about how fast he was. And I said, yeah, I couldn't run that fast. And he said, well, you know, they're all fast. See? What was your effect on that? Because I literally said to him, what do you mean they're all fast? He goes, well, all the sprinters, they're faster than I am. His intent was not a racial comment. His intent in his mind was he was talking about sprinters all being fast. Even the slowest guy was faster than we were. But he said they're all fast. But the effect that I heard was a completely different statement. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. There was no intent from Daryl to make a racial comment. But I heard something different. The effect could have been, hey, wait a minute, Daryl, that's a racial comment. And he's like, well, no, not. I never intended that. I was talking about sprinters. What did you think I meant? So you've got to be careful because this is an effects law. You could say something that has no intent in your mind that maybe causes an effect on that side to get you in trouble. If I wanted to joke and say, everybody that wears glasses is 10 IQ points lower, and I'm trying to be funny, there was no intent, But somebody that's wearing glasses might go, hey, I am offended and hurt by that. The effect is what they will go by. It's not the intent. You cannot stand in front of a judge and go, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. Doesn't matter. The effect is the law. Okay? Now, there's some other things that bother me about this. That doesn't bother me as much as this bothers me. Because we're so keen on trying to make it balanced, sometimes there are some rules that I think are wrong. For example, see the page there with the poster? On page 35, there's that poster. That's the fair housing poster. All right? If you fail to disclose this poster at your operation of business, you are assumed to practice discriminatorily and will be fined. So you are guilty until you prove your innocence. All right? So every brokerage that you guys will attend will have that poster in their lobby. And if they don't have that poster, it's a $500 fine. Okay? That little housing, the equal housing logo, see the house with the little equal sign in the middle? Most of you or some of you will actually get that on your business card. Some companies put that on their business card to show that they don't discriminate, but that's actually what I'm talking about. You have to tell people you don't discriminate, or in fact you are determined to do it. Now, in their defense, it doesn't have to be fancy. You literally can rip this page out of your book and tape it to the wall of your office and you're covered. All right? You just have to have it displayed. No, you don't have to have it on your business card because it's displayed at your place of business. All right? And your business is the brokerage. Should be where it can be seen by the public. Typically, the receptionist has it in a little 8 by 10 frame sitting. You'll move it today. So let's go over some of the definitions that the Department of Housing and Urban Development are the ones that control the Fair Housing Act, HUD. These are HUD rules or laws. So what is a dwelling? A dwelling is any building that is designed for human occupancy, including single-family homes, apartments, condos, co-ops, or, and here's the kicker, or any land that is earmarked to build one of those. So if you're selling a vacant lot in a housing addition, which technically has no house on it, you still abide by the fair housing laws because that lot is designed to build a house on it. Okay? So any building designed for human occupancy or the land that's earmarked to build those on. And I think it's like within the next 2 years. So theoretically, if you wanted to read the negative version of that, if you're selling 80 acres of farmland that's being sold to be tillable farmland, fair housing may not apply. Commercial buildings, fair housing may not apply because they're not, it's not a house. This is a housing rule. Okay? The next one is familial status. Now, I don't care where you stand on Roe versus Wade, and I'm not going to argue it with you, but I cannot believe that no politician has ever jumped on this next definition, because this is a definition inside of HUD, which is a government agency. A family is defined as one or more individuals under the age of 18 living with a person or guardian. It also includes a woman who is pregnant. So a pregnant female gets family protection. So they kind of already decided when life starts. All right? So familial status. There is an exemption to this. This is that HOPA rule. All right? There was a lady that called me one day, and she wanted to talk about a potential lawsuit, and she was saying, we moved into a house that was an over 55 housing. They won't let my son move in. I want to sue because that's a violation of the familial status law. And I said, well, how old's your son? She said 27. I said, well, I'm out. Yes. But also, they are not picking on her because it was her son. They were picking on her because the other person was not 55. All right? It was an age thing. If her son would have been 55, there wouldn't have been a problem with him living in there. Because they have HOPA, the Housing for Older Persons Act, has exemptions and qualifications that allow it to only serve people that are over 55. Okay? So, family. Disability. Disability includes any handicap or disability, physical or mental impairment that limits the quality of life. This includes people with HIV. All right? I had a young lady in here one day who started crying and left class because I was mean. I do not understand why HIV is in this class, personally. And she said, well, her brother had HIV. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that. And she said, well, yeah, but he's going to die. I said, so are we all. Well, he has a blood disease. And I said, oh, well, what about sickle cell anemia, which targets the black population, or Tay-Sachs disease, which targets the Jewish population, or high blood pressure, or cholesterol, or diabetes, which are all blood diseases in essence. And she got upset with me and stormed out crying. So remember that. People with HIV are protected under a disability. I keep waiting for them to put fat people in the disability so I can get something out of this. You know. I went to the gym the other day, and I pulled up, and I said, oh, look, fat man parking. It was right up front. Turned out to be handicapped. So I drove around 20 minutes waiting for a spot to open because I ain't walking all the way in from the gym to... That's probably wrong. Now, one of the big things, and this is where I'm getting at some of the stuff that's coming in, are these new helping pets. Because helping animals are not a pet. If you have a no pets clause in your rule, but you have someone that has a helping animal, you cannot block that animal from coming in. It's not a pet. It's a medical device, right? And that has become a big scenario here recently in the last 4 or 5 days, 6 days, with some friends of mine that are professional property managers, and there are people that are getting doctor's notes for their cat to be, because it's an emotional release.
We have, and I've had issues in the past with this, trying to tell them that they're not allowed to. So you have the police that have their working animal, who's actually an employee of the state.
Right.
But they don't allow German shepherds because they're in that whatever no pet rule. What do you, I mean, how do you explain that to them, that they can't do that?
That who can do that?
That they can't rent.
Don't you first have to be diagnosed with some sort of disability?
Well, this is a worker. I mean, the pet is not a pet. It's a worker of the state.
That's not a pet. Even if you have a no pets clause, you cannot stop that.
Okay.
That's not a pet.
I was just curious about it because I've seen it happen. They're just like, no. And I'm like, I don't think that you can do that.
You cannot.
Okay.
if they have a letter from a qualified physician that says this cat helps this person with their, what's that called when you get real excited? What? Anxiety issues. That's now a medical device. That's not a pet. All right?
I'm trying to understand where we're injecting the animals into this particular, you talked about rentals.
The
Right.
rentals are.
Typically, this is a question with rentals. It's not a question with me selling my house. All right? There's some other issues that come into play with mainly rentals and not so much sales, and we'll talk about it here in just a second, okay? But for the rental property, yes. I had a gentleman that came to one of my rentals that was blind and had the seeing eye dog. And when he came to the house, he brought the dog in and he started swinging it around. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? He's like, I'm just looking around. Guy said he used to skydive too, but he had to quit because it kept scaring the hell out of the dog. Don't laugh, that just encourages me.
When you do the rentals with these service animals, when you move into an apartment, you usually have to pay an animal fee. Is that then you don't pay that?
I would assume that's waived. It's not a pet. But here's the problem. Most people have that rule because, like, I had a rule there was no pets. Because I had new carpet that I just put in, I didn't want cat spraying or dog stuff like that. So this guy comes in, literally, that was a true story. He was blind and had an aid dog. Dog still peed on the carpet. So the reason I had a no pets rule was exactly what the dog did, but I couldn't say no pets because he's a helping animal now. And there are websites out there that tell tenants how to beat this system. How to get a letter and how to get something from the doctor and all that. So, but you just have to be careful that a disability is not as cut and dried as it looks. They also don't have to exhibit disability. Meaning, we would all say, well, there's a guy in a wheelchair, he's disabled. All right? But if someone says, oh, I've got anxiety or disorders, they may, and I'm using finger quotes for the online people, look normal, they could still claim a disability.
Yeah, you see those people pulling the handicap spots all the time.
Yeah.
They were playing one now as emotional support.
Yeah, there are people that pull into the handicap. Now, and I used to get upset at that when you'd see somebody get out in a handicap spot, and then right before my father passed away, he had a severe heart condition with congenital heart failure, and his lungs filled up and couldn't breathe because he'd walk 10 or 12 feet and couldn't breathe. And when you looked at Dad, he did not look, finger quotes again, he wasn't in a cane, didn't have a wheelchair, none of that. And I'm sure there are people that looked at my dad when he would get out of the parking spot and go, why does that guy need? So I try not to say that anymore because you don't know. They could have internal issues that keep them.
There was a news story about, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, a young woman in her 30s, same thing. She had a heart condition, and somebody left a nasty note on her car
Yeah.
after using the handicap spot.
Yeah. The Meyer store now have pregnant lady parking. Yeah, I parked in that the one day and got out and was like, oh, my ovaries, and limped in. All right, let's